Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Have you ever thrown a party where one guest made your heart race with worry? Tonight was one of those nights for me. The smell of garlic and herbs cooking in the oven filled every corner of our house. It was the kind of smell that usually made me feel warm and safe, like everything was right with the world. But tonight, even though our summer party was going perfectly, I couldn't shake the nervous feeling in my stomach. The sound of people talking and glasses clinking drifted through the rooms. About 20 people had come to our party, and they were all having a good time. Some were inside chatting by the fireplace. Others had wandered out to our back patio where the evening air was just starting to cool down. My husband Tom had been acting strange all week. Not because of the party itself. We'd done this many times before. No, Tom was worried about one specific person who was coming tonight. His name was Arthur Caldwell, and he was Tom's boss at the company. Mr. Caldwell wasn't just any boss. Was the big boss, the CEO of the whole company. Tom had been working for him for almost 10 years now. In all that time, Tom had always spoken about Mr. Caldwell with respect, but also with something else. It wasn't exactly fear, more like the feeling you get when you're around someone very important and you don't want to mess up. I smoothed my hands over my light blue dress. It was made of soft linen, and I'd chosen it because the color always made me feel calm. I needed that calmness tonight. Looking around the room, I spotted Tom talking with our neighbors, the Johnsons. He had his party smile on, the one he used when he was trying to be social but wasn't really relaxed. His shoulders looked tense, and every few minutes he would look around the room, catching my eye. When he did, I'd give him a little nod, trying to tell him without words that everything was okay. Tom and I had always been a good team, especially when it came to these work parties. They weren't really our idea of fun. We both preferred quiet evenings at home. But they were important for Tom's job, so we did them together. I actually didn't mind hosting parties most of the time. I liked the busy feeling of getting ready, seeing friends I hadn't talked to in a while, and trying out new recipes I'd been wanting to make. But tonight felt different. There was an extra tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. Mr. Caldwell was easy to spot in our living room. Stood near the big glass doors that led out to our garden, and people seemed to gather around him naturally. He wasn't loud or trying to get attention. Actually, it was the opposite. He spoke in a quiet, careful way that made everyone lean in to hear what he was saying. It was probably the same way he talked in business meetings.com. And in control. He was a tall man, probably in his early 60s, with perfectly neat silver hair. His clothes looked expensive, but not flashy. What struck me most were his eyes. They were sharp and seemed to notice everything that was happening around him. I'd only met him a few times before, always at company events where we'd exchange polite hellos and talk about the weather. He was always perfectly polite, but there was something about him that felt untouchable. Like he lived in a different world from the rest of us. Tonight, having him in our house, that feeling was even stronger. It was like having a celebrity or a politician over for dinner. You want to act normal, but you can't quite forget who they are. I'd spent most of the day making sure everything in the house looked perfect. Our garden was at its best right now. The big blue hydrangea bushes were covered in flowers, and Tom had spent hours last week hanging string lights between the trees. As the sun started to set, those lights made everything look magical and welcoming. Inside, I'd set up a big table with all kinds of food. There were the little quiches that everyone always asked for the recipe to. A new salmon spread I'd been nervous to try. Several different salads, a variety of cheeses, and fresh bread from the bakery. Downtown, I'd even remembered to make little cards with the names of all the cheeses, something I usually forgot until guests were asking what they were eating. Maybe it was silly to put so much work into impressing Tom's boss. But it wasn't just about Tom's career, though that was part of it. I wanted our home to feel warm and welcoming. I wanted everyone, even someone as important as Arthur Caldwell, to feel comfortable here. I wanted him to see that Tom had a good life, a nice family, a wife who cared about making people feel at home. As I walked around the party, filling up bowls that were getting empty and making sure everyone had what they needed, I kept finding myself looking over at Mr. Caldwell. Right now, he was listening to Michael Perry, a young guy from Tom's department who was talking with his hands, clearly excited about some project at work. Mr. Caldwell was nodding occasionally, but his face didn't show much. I wondered if he was really interested in what Michael was saying, or if this was just something he'd learned to do as a boss. Look like you're paying attention while your mind is somewhere else. I found myself curious about him in a way I hadn't expected. What was he like when he wasn't at work? Did he have hobbies? Did he ever just sit on his couch and watch TV like normal people? It was hard to picture him doing anything ordinary. My friend Clara appeared beside me, holding a glass of wine and wearing the mischievous smile she got when she was about to say something she probably shouldn't. "He's not as scary as Tom makes him sound, is he?" she whispered, tilting her head toward Mr. Caldwell. "He looks serious, sure, but not mean. More like a stern grandfather or something." I laughed quietly. "I wouldn't know, Clara. I've been too busy making sure we don't run out of food." I picked up an empty platter from the table. Speaking of which, duty calls. The kitchen was quieter than the rest of the house, and I took a moment to just breathe. I could still hear the party, people laughing, conversations mixing together. But it was muffled here. I started arranging more of the smoked salmon appetizers on the platter. But my mind wandered back to Mr. Caldwell. Tom had mentioned once, almost like he was just thinking out loud, that Mr. Caldwell's wife had died a few years ago. Some kind of sudden illness, Tom thought. It was just a small detail, but it made me think about him differently. Maybe this serious, distant way he acted wasn't just his personality. Maybe it was his way of protecting himself after losing someone important. I thought about the small room at the back of our house that I used as an art studio. It wasn't much, just a sunny little space with an easel, some shelves for supplies, and a comfortable chair by the window. Right now there was a half-finished painting sitting on the easel, a landscape of the coastal town where I grew up. Been working on it for months. But lately, I hadn't had time to pick up a paintbrush. It seemed like there was always something else that needed to be done first. Tom had been stressed about work, so I'd focused on making sure things at home were smooth. The garden needed attention. The house needed cleaning. There were always errands to run, people to see, obligations to meet. My painting kept getting pushed to later when Tom felt better, later when the house was perfect, later when I had more time. But later never seemed to come. With the platter full again, I put my hostess' smile back on and headed toward the living room. As I walked past the hallway that led to the back part of our house, I noticed the door was slightly open. I usually kept that area closed off during parties. It helped keep people in the main entertaining areas and gave us some privacy. I walked over to push the door closed. Then I stopped. Through the gap, I could see into our den. And there, standing alone in the quieter space, was Mr. Caldwell. My heart jumped a little with surprise. He wasn't supposed to be back there. But he wasn't snooping or being nosy. He was just standing, very still, his hands folded behind his back, looking at something on the far side of the room. Following his gaze, I realized what had caught his attention. My easel. My unfinished painting of the coastline with its soft blues and greens. The rough sketch of cliffs and water that I'd been slowly working on for so long. He was studying it the way people look at art in museums, quietly, thoughtfully, taking his time. In the dim light of the den, away from the noise and energy of the party, he looked different. Less like the intimidating CEO and more like just a person, someone who might understand what it meant to create something with your own hands. I knew I should probably make some noise. Let him know I was there. It felt like I was watching a private moment, something I wasn't supposed to see. But I couldn't move. There was something about the way he stood there, the careful attention he was giving to my simple painting, that made me want to understand what he was thinking. The sounds of the party seemed far away now, like they were coming from another world. In this quiet hallway, watching Mr. Caldwell look at my art, I felt like I was seeing something real about him for the first time. Something that had nothing to do with boardrooms or business deals or being Tom's intimidating boss. I stood there, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, wondering what would happen if I stepped forward and said hello. Would he be embarrassed at being caught? Would he make some polite comment about the painting and hurry back to the party? Or would he maybe want to talk about it? For the first time all evening, I wasn't thinking about whether the food was getting cold or if the guests were having a good time. I was thinking about what it would be like to have a real conversation with Arthur Caldwell. Not about work or the weather, but about something that mattered to me. About art, about creativity, about the way it feels to try to capture something beautiful and make it permanent. But I still couldn't bring myself to move. I just stood there, watching him look at my painting, wondering what he saw in those unfinished brushstrokes, and feeling like the evening had just taken a turn toward something completely unexpected. I was rooted to the spot, a strange mixture of apprehension and an even stranger curiosity holding me captive. What was he thinking? Was he judging my imagerous brush? Trust? My unfinished work? It felt like he was looking at a part of me that I kept hidden. Not just from guests, but increasingly even from myself, and that's when he moved slowly, taking a step closer to the easel and the world's cimento. Tilt on its axis, I must have made Asmel sound, maybe my breath cut back. He turned, then not with a start, but with a slow, deliberate movement. High size met mine. They weren't stern or critical as I'd half expected. There was something else in them. Something I couldn't quite decipher, a flicker of surprise. Perhaps but also a kind of quiet contemplation. He didn't say anything immediately, and neither did I. I thesilely stretched, filled only by thickened strains of music from the living room and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I felt my cheeks flush embarrassado, be caught observing him, and even more embarrassed that he was looking at my very personal, very incomplete painting. So offered a small, almost hesitant smile, a completely unexpected expression that softened the sharp lines of his face. Anton. He spoke, his voice quiet, but it landed with the weight of something far more significant than the casual setting would suggest. This is yours, Sarah? He asked, his gaze shifting from me back to the canvas thento. Again, it wasn't an accusation, or even a simple question. There was a tornado. A resonance that went straight through me, making me feel exposed and thoughts, when I truly froze, not from fear, but from a profound sense of anticipation, like standing on the edge, an unknown precipice. I had no idea what was about to happen, but I knew somehow that this was nerdinary party chit-chat. This wasn't nothing else entirely. He gestured towards the painting, a seascape I'd been struggling with for months, trying to capture that particular way the light hit the cliffs at sunset. The light, he said, his voice still quiet, almost a murmur. You're trying to capture the ephemeral glow just before it fades. That's incredibly defect. I just stared at him. How could this man, this titan of industry, understand the very specific artistic struggle that had kept Mary turning to this canvas, frustrated but determined? It wasn't a generic comato, a pretty picture. It was a specific observation, one that showed he was true looking, not just glancing. Yes, I managed my voice, bearing a whisper. It's been a challenge, he nodded slowly, his eyes still on the painting, my late wife, Eleanor. Hesed, and his voice softened with a tenderness that was so unexpected it made my breath catch. She was a painter, landscapes mostly. She always said the hardest thing was to paint, not just what to see, but what you feel about what you see, especially the light. She called it painting fear. Eleanor. He spoke her name with such reverence, such love. Suddenly, the image of the formidable CEO began to dissolve, replaced by something far more human, far more vulnerable. I saw not Tom's boss, but Eamon, who had loved and lost a man, how understood the language of art, all feeling painting the air. I repeated that phrase, resonating deep within me. That's a beautiful way to put it. She would spend hours. He continued, a faint, sad smile playing on his lips, just watching. Light change. She had a little cottage studio much like this room. Homogeneous, filled with the smell of turpentine and linseed oil and canvas season. Various states of becoming. He looked around my cluttered sunroom at the Tubasoft paint, the stained rags, the collection of brushes in old jam jars, his iceware, and critical as I'd feared they were understanding more than understanding thee. Held a spark of recognition. I haven't painted much lately, I confessed, feeling a sudden urge to explain, to share something of myself with this man who was in a matter of moments transforming before my eyes. Life gets busy, you know. I do know, Hest. His gaze returning to me, and there was a depth of empathy in his eyes that I was utterly disarming. Eleanor used to say that life was the biggest distraction from Lavinga. Bit of a paradox, but understood what meant: the things we must do after and crowd out the things we need to do for ourselves, for our souls. The words hung in the air between Eustace. Wasn't a conversation I had a vera imagined having with Arthur Caldwell. It was intimate, profound, and it washapooning in the quiet chaos of my ounce lightly neglected creative space. I felt a warmth spread through me, a connection thought was as surprising as it was welcome. He wasn't just seeing a hobby, a please on past him, was seeing a part of me that I had allowed to become dormant, and he was in his own quiet way acknowledging its importance. She left behind so many unfinished pieces. He went on, his voice tinged with a gentle melancholy. For a long time I couldn't bear to look at them. It felt like an accusation. All that beauty interrupted, paused, and I could see the effort it took him to continue. But then I started to see them differently, not as unfinished, but as moments captured, each one a testament to our passion, to her way of seeing the world. He took a step closer to my easel for a wild second. I thought he might reach out and touch the canvas instead. Just looked at it, really looked this light. You're chasing, he said. It's worth chasing, Sarah. Don't let the distractions win. For too long his words were simply direct, yet they landed with the force of fair revelation. It wasn't advice, not rely it. Was more like permission to value this part of myself, permission to make space for it again from the most unexpected off sources. Tom's formidable boss, the Maenad only ever seen as a distant figure of authority, was standing in my mesa studio, speaking to my heart in a way few people ever had. The party outside, with its laughter and clinking glasses, felt a million miles away in this smells and drenched room. Something significant was shifting within me, a reawakening of sorts. All because Arthur Caldwell had dared to step away from the noise. Antrally, see, I found my voice, though it was still a little shaky. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, for saying thought. For understanding. He turned fully towards Methan, and the hesitant smile from before her turned a little more confidence this time. Arthur, please, he said, and thank you, Sarah, for sharing your light with him. He gestured again to the painting given in its becoming Arthur. The name felt strange on me tongue, yet somehow right in this new context. The formal barrier between us had not just been lowered, it had dissolved. He wasn't just Tom's boss no more, he was Arthur. A man who understood loss, who appreciated art, and woe had, in a few short minutes, given me an incredible gift, a renewed sense of mon creative esprit. He glanced towards the door as if suddenly remembering the party he'd momentarily escaped. Perhaps we should rejoin the others before your husband sends out a search party. There was a hint of humor in his tone now, a lightness that hadn't been there before. Eyes, perhaps we should. I agreed, though a part of me wanted to stay in the quiet sanctuary of the sunroom to talk more about Ella Laner, about painting, about theater. As we walked back towards Stella Villiers, part of the house, I felt different. The earlier tension I carried about the party, about him being Thor, had vanished. In its place was aquiote sense of wonder and a burgeoning jectant. He had seen a piece of my soul, and instead of judging it, he had validated it. When we re-entered the living room, the atmosphere seemed supplicant. Or maybe it was me who had changed. Tom looked over, saw us emerging from the hallway together, and I could see a flicker of surprise, maybe a little concern in his eyes. I offered him a warm smile, wider and more genuine than any eat, given all evening, Mr. Caldwell. Arthur caught Tom's eye and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that seemed to convey a simpler reassuring message. Tom's shoulders were visibly relaxed the rest of the evening pissed. In a pleasant blur I found myself observing Arthur with. New eyes he was still distinguished, still commanded attention, but now saw the warmth beneath the reserve, the hint of sadness behind. The perceptive gaze I saw a memoir. Carried his own stories, his own private griefs and passions, just like a rest of us the conversation we'd shared in the sunroom replayed and mimicked. His words echoing, "Don't let the distractions win for too long." It felt like a call to action, a gentle nudge from an unexpected mentor as the party wound down and guests began to depart offering their thanks. Arthur approached Tom and me. "After Sarah, Tom," he said, heiserlier formality slightly softened. "Thank you for a truly wonderful evening. Home is lovely, and the food was exceptional. We're so glad you could come," Arthur replied, using his first name. Feeling more natural now, Tom shot me a quick, surprised glance, but said nothing. Arthur extended his hand to Tom. "Tom, always a pleasure." Then he turned to me for a moment. I thought he might shake my hand too. Instead, his eyes met mine, and there was that same look of quiet thunder sting. "Keep chasing that light, Sarah," he said softly, "just for me to hear." And then with a polite nod he was gone. I stood at the doorway for a moment, watching his car pull away from the red taillights disappearing to the night the air, while school now carrying the scent of damp earth and the lingering aroma of charcoal from a neighbor's barb. Tom came up behind me, slipping an arm around my waist. "Well," he said, a note of relief in his voice that went better than expected. He seemed to actually enjoy himself. He paused. "You two seem to having quite the chat in the den. Everything all right?" He leaned back against him, a sigh of contentment escaping me. "Everything is more than all right," Tom said, smiling. "Oh, myself in the darkness. It's surprisingly wonderful." I wasn't quite ready to share the details of my conversation with Arthur just yet. It felt too personal too, but I knew it had changed something, not just my perception of Tom's boss, but my perception of myself and what I wanted. No needed Tomic time. For in my life later that night, after the last dish was washed and the house was finally quiet, I found myself drawn back to the sunroom. The moonlight cast long shadows across the floor, illuminating easel and the unfinished canvas. Picked up a brush, feeling its familiar weight in my hand, painting the air. It whispered to myself Eleanor's words, screamed by Arthur, echoing in my mind. For the first time in a long time, I felt a true, uncluttered desire to paint the distractions. Hadn't one, not tonight. And as I dipped the brush into a dew of cerulean blue, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for an unexpected encounter, a shared moment of vulnerability that had somehow managed to rekindle a forgotten flame. Within me, the house party had ended, but for me, something new was just beginning, and it all started because Tom's boss, a man I thought I had all figured out, had taken a quiet moment to look, to really see, and to share a pass off his own heart that I realized was adject more precious than any business ex.